There's a certain amount of self-assuredness online that Donald Trump cannot win in 2024. The usual reasons offered up to support this notion are that Trump lost in 2020, his ongoing legal woes will weigh him down or put him behind bars before the election, the economy is good, incumbents historically have an advantage, and it's too early to be looking at polls. However, only the historical incumbent advantage is true. The rest are either false or not relevant. Thus, here are the reasons why I consider Trump the current frontrunner in a rematch with President Biden. Number 1. Americans perceive the economy as bad. Historically, the state of the economy has some predictive value when it comes to elections. Good economic numbers benefit the incumbent and hurt them when they're bad. The facts that the United States has low unemployment and falling interest rates, and that forecasters have stopped predicting an imminent recession, should all work in Joe Biden's favor. However, none of that matters if people don't perceive the economy to be good, which they don't. They vote based on their individual perceptions rather than what the published unemployment rate is, and only 25% think the economy is at least somewhat good. Right now, perceptions of the economy are hurting Biden, and that seems unlikely to change for the better. Number 2. Trump probably won't be in prison at the time of the election because these trials take so long, and he faces the possibility of being out on appeal even if he does go to trial. It normally takes between 12 to 18 months for a federal case to go to trial, and Trump's team will do everything they can to delay it as long as possible. They'll also drag out the trial itself by every means available. And if that doesn't work, and he's somehow convicted before the election, they'll do everything they can to see that he's out on bail while the appeals process goes through. More likely than not, he's going to be able to campaign through much or all of the election cycle. On top of that, Judge Eileen Cannon appears to be all in on helping the defense in Trump's trial for taking top-secret documents from the White House, making it significantly less likely that Trump will be convicted. Number 3. Republicans don't care what he's accused of or don't believe it. Trump has now been indicted in 3 jurisdictions, and there's potentially a 4th one coming in Georgia. However, polling shows that this has no effect on about half of Republicans' voting preferences, and about 1 in 5 say they're more likely to vote for him because of the indictments. The vast majority, 65%, believe he's innocent, and 70% believe that Biden stole the 2020 election. The trials and their outcomes are not going to affect the GOP base much, if at all, simply because they exist in a cloud of conspiracy thinking. Number 4. The Electoral College gives Trump a big advantage. Polling says it's a dead heat, but the bias in the Electoral College means Biden needs to win by something like 3.8 points to have a 50-50 chance of winning. If the national vote is a tie, Trump has about a 93% chance of winning based on my own modeling. Based on pure polling, if the election were held today, Biden would almost certainly lose the Electoral College count decisively. Number 5. It's not too early for polling. Usually, polling far in advance of an election isn't super reliable. People need to make up their minds about the candidates, and that involves getting to know them. This isn't the case with Biden and Trump. Both are household names who have served as president. People already made up their minds twice on Trump and once on Biden. Through the majority of the 2020 election cycle, the polling numbers changed very little over time, because we have entered into an era of hype partisanship where there are very few true independents. The conclusion I reach now is that the polling data is unlikely to change very much between now and Election Day 2024. Number 6. The polls in 2016 and 2020 underestimated Trump. There's a lot of theories on why polls were so wrong in 2016 and 2020, but the important takeaway is that the aggregated polling numbers consistently underestimated his support. They missed by 1.1 points in 2016 and 2.7 points in 2020. We are in a position where Trump could win the popular vote if polls are showing a dead heat but have the same amount of bias as in the past 2 general election cycles. If so, the possibility of Biden winning drops to effectively 0. Number 7. Biden's popularity is lower than Republicans. Currently, the public trusts Congress more than Biden to work in their interests. His approval ratings are in the same vicinity now as when Trump lost the 2020 election. When you dig into how the public as a whole feels about Biden, you end up seeing a GOP base that absolutely despises him, and a Democratic base that overwhelmingly wishes someone else would run. Which leads to Number 8. The GOP base is more energized. Republicans turned out in bigger numbers in the 2022 midterms than Democrats. Of course, it's not unusual for the out-party base to come to the polls in larger numbers than the in-party in a midterm. But that gap is likely to grow even wider in the general election as Trump tends to draw the MAGA base to the polls. Turnout in the midterms was high, and it's likely to be higher in the 2024 election. That's not to say that the entirety of the GOP base is fired up. 44% of Republicans in a poll by the Associated Press said they didn't want Trump to run again. Bad, but still way better than the 75% of Democrats who wanted someone other than Biden. Number 9. Biden doesn't get much credit for what he has done, and he's been hampered by a GOP House since the midterms. It's no secret that there's an enthusiasm gap between Republicans and Democrats leading into 2024. Joe Biden doesn't fire up the base like Obama, and he's hampered by the fact that the GOP controls the House, thus preventing any major legislation from getting through. Even during the first half of his presidency, the filibuster prevented him from moving legislation through that wasn't budget-oriented. While the Build Back Better Act, Inflation Reduction Act, and putting judges on the bench are all significant, it's popular with people who are already politically engaged. Popular items to protect civil rights and election integrity died a slow, agonizing death in the Senate. He's been hamstrung by right-wing district court judges like Matthew Kaczmarek and Reed O'Connor in Texas, as well as the Supreme Court. Increasingly, Biden uncomfortably reminds me of President Buchanan. At the same time, Republican legislators have been more than happy to claim credit for projects they voted against, further diluting the credit Biden might receive. Conversely, the GOP base is itching to bring Trump back to save America and wreak vengeance on their culture war enemies. This has the potential to make the Buchanan comparison even more apt. Number 10. People aren't scared enough of a second Trump term. Conservatives have put out a 920-page plan for what they intend to do during a second Trump term called the Mandate for Leadership. It's essentially the end of government regulation, environmental law, civil rights laws, abortion, LGBTQ protections, and multilateral U.S. foreign relations. A Trump administration would also target minorities for more direct persecution, including immigrants, Muslims, and transgender people. They intend to reshape federal government by firing most senior federal workers and replacing them with party loyalists using Schedule F. They will embrace the unitary executive theory to allow Trump to rule via fiat, and fully weaponize the Department of Justice against political appointees and blue state leaders who resist the Republican plan to make America Florida. Understanding how catastrophic a GOP takeover would be requires reading a lot, because their plan is so expansive. It's difficult to wrap your head around how bad it would be, because it defies imagination how far they can, and will, take the U.S. down the road to Christian, theocratic, plutocratic dystopia. The vague discontent of the public requires little effort to instill, but it takes a great deal more effort to get them to believe and understand how bad a second term would be.